Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening for another installment of the Ferré Institute Civic Engagement, Civic Leadership and Service Series in partnership with the Jack D. Gordon Institute for Public Policy for the FIU Policy Lab. We're really excited to be joined this evening with Mr. James Hodge, President and CEO of the Children's Trust of Miami-Dade County. The Maurice A. Institute for Civic Leadership and the Stephen J. Green School of International and Public Affairs at FIU hosts the Civic Leadership and Service Series for conversations with civic leaders around civic leadership and engagement, community infrastructure, and social justice. We're very excited to be joined, and I'm going to also introduce as well Natalia Zaya, who's our course assistant and also a colleague of Mr. Hodge to also help us with our introductions. For the students in the class, I know you had a chance to review his bio, which is in the course calendar. For those of you that maybe aren't as familiar, I'll go ahead and just ask Natalia just to provide a few words of welcome.
Sure thing, thank you. Oops, muted myself. You see what happens when the boss joins the class? Get all nervous. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say thank you very much to Jim for being here. We've talked a lot in this course about leadership. Dave joined us for one of the courses, and they're really getting a treat in being able to meet with so many of these prominent community leaders with big hearts who are doing great work. So I'm going to actually read your official style bio, but I'll just say before I start, Jim's a real powerhouse in the community as it relates to giving back and making sure that kids and families are served. So it's really great to have you here, Jim. So Mr. Hodge joined the Children's Trust as president and CEO in April of 2016. As president and CEO, he provides exceptional leadership, working with the Trust's 33-member board of directors and community stakeholders to establish strategies focused on improving the lives of kids and family in Miami-Dade. During his tenure, he's overseen unprecedented growth at the Trust, with its total budget and number of programs serving children and families reaching historic heights. The Trust funds approximately 150 agencies and supports 200 programs at 2,000 sites across the county. Of note, during his time with the Trust, management expenses have dropped to an all-time low, resulting in additional direct funding support for the kids and families of Miami-Dade County. Mr. Hodge also led the Trust through what could have been its most challenging year in 2020, when all operations quickly pivoted to a remote model during the coronavirus pandemic to support providers who were struggling to keep serving our most vulnerable children and families while ensuring the safety of all Trust staff and those who interact with them. While leading the Trust, Mr. Hodge has received numerous honors and accolades, including the prestigious 2022 MCCJ Silver Medallion Award, given to community leaders who've made outstanding contributions to our community. His impact as head of the Trust was also recognized by proclamation by the Miami-Dade School Board in 2021. And in 2020, he was named an Apogee Award recipient by South Florida Business and Wealth magazine and a panelist in Miami Herald's Florida Influencer Series, among other honors. His dedication to serving children and families began earlier in his career when he was the principal of Paul Bell Middle. He also was the principal at Southwest Miami Senior High, which is his alma mater. He's very proud of that fact. And he took that latter school, Southwest, from a D to an A in a significantly improved overall academic achievement, boosted graduation rates, and championed inclusion for the school's special needs population. He's also served as administrative director for MDCPS's South and Central regions. And in that role, he oversaw 170 schools and nearly 200,000 students. In that capacity, he provided one-on-one support and guidance principals and assistant principals about curriculum and instruction, state accountability and school improvement, teacher evaluations, and professional standards and crisis response plans, as well as student safety. He was also the Assistant Superintendent of Labor Relations and Compensation at Miami-Dade County Public Schools, acting as its chief negotiator with 5 labor unions representing more than 31,000 full-time employees. He is a lifelong Miami resident. He has an MBA in business management from UM and a BS in education from FSU. He and his wife, Karen, are parents of 3 children. That is the full bio of Jim. Dr. Caraballo, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Natalia. And beyond your impressive bio, I'm going to start off with a question. What else would you like us to know about you as a civic leader and public servant?
No, I just thank you for having me. Natalia, thank you for the introduction. I think the smartest thing I ever did was hiring Natalia. So she just runs the show. I just say yes. There's not much more I do at the trust. Um, but it's just, I have been a lifelong resident. I grew up down the street from FIU, back when it was an airstrip and two buildings. And thank God I didn't have to go in today because I didn't want to drive around and have to find parking. So the virtual component actually works very well for all of us. But very proud to see this community grow from somewhat rural to a metropolitan city. See in the early 80s. I mean, it's hard also. You had Dave Lawrence on here. It's hard to follow Dave after Dave speaks. But in the early 80s, when you had Paradise Lost with Time Magazine talking about Miami and how between the Mariel boat lift, the riots, the drugs, and everything else, Miami was in a tough spot. But we're a resilient community. We're a beautiful community. You look at the trust, how the trust was founded with an 86% approval rating from the voters. Teachers referendums comes out, bond referendum. Miami's a very generous city, and it wraps its arms around children and families. And I think that's why we are we give ourselves a hard time. And sometimes we have a bad rap. But we are a beautiful city. I keep on saying the rest of the nation will look like us in 20 years. So what we do right will be the roadmap for the rest of the nation. And I was so pleased when you asked me to be here, just to see all the students in the class and the future of this community. Our community is bright. Our future is very bright for this community. It's just a matter of people being engaged, people feeling that they have a voice, and people stepping up and doing the right things.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Our colleague, Dr. Howard Frank, constantly says that South Florida is a living laboratory that everyone looks to learn and to see what we're doing to follow our lead. We were really fortunate to have Dave Lawrence very recently. Like I said, I still have to get his books over to you all to get those signatures, those signatures and get them signed out. But, definitely in your role as the president and CEO of the Children's Trust, what does that mean in terms of public service in the context of your role as a leader?
So when Dave started the trust, we're coming up on our 20th year anniversary. So when Dave started the trust, it was about how do we provide additional support for children and family? And I'm not sure how familiar this group is with the trust in the creation. We have several sister organizations. We have 11 sister organizations throughout Florida. Florida is the only state in the nation that has the Children's Service Council model built into statute that allows communities to tax themselves to support children and families. So going back to, we should be very proud. So we support children and families and our budget is about $200 million annually. So it's providing additional supports. We do not fund the school system. It's not supposed to be to supplant anything. It's really additional supports for after school and summer program. So we do everything. We run the gamut from prenatal or birth to 18. A little older, we fund for children with disabilities, foster care youth. And it is really supporting early childhood education, which Dave was, as you know, if you heard Dave speak, he's a huge proponent for early child care. And how do we provide those? Every single parent loves their child, but there are parents who need additional supports. If you've been in this community, and looking around, if you're old enough, you've been in this community long enough, the zip codes that the kids are behind the 8 ball. You don't need too much research to know where the kids are born in, and they're going to have a very difficult time if we do not get them up to speed. We talk. You hear a lot about third grade literacy. If a child's not reading by 3rd grade, the chances that same child by 11th grade reading it doesn't go up considerably. So it's how do we move the needle at the very early ages for child development before they hit kindergarten? And that's what we're here for, to support the early stages as well as the youth development. We fund early child care. We have 30,000 kids in our after school and summer programs. And I'm always proud to say, besides the research, that's 30,000 kids who are off the street. That's 30,000 parents who know that their kids are in a safe place, getting all the literacy skills, social emotional skills, the homework assistance, and everything else that's needed. We have clinics in 150 schools. You have many kids who do not have a primary medical home. So how do these kids get health care? How do they get seen? How do they have the dental care? How do they have the vision screening, the necessary eyeglasses? We also have 5 mobile units which we fund to help go to where the children are. We do a lot with adolescents with our summer youth internship program. So we have a variety of programs, but the trust really is to kind of supplement what is going on to this community and help move the needle and fill the gaps where kids are dropping through.
Absolutely, no. This semester, our students are actually working on 3 policy issues. One of them being career and life skills training for children and foster children. Can you tell us a little bit more about the program that you had mentioned for foster children?
Well, we do a lot with foster care. I think everybody, if you're working on that project, you know the difficulties of foster care youth. You know the difficulties when they're under 18, but also when they're aging out. And so the summer youth internship, which we are doing now, where we started this 6-7 years ago, my years blend, where we started with 1,000 or 2,000 kids. We came up to almost 3,000 kids many years ago, but then COVID hit. But these are where we have high school students working in jobs. We open up the bank account, we pay them, they come insured, and it's to give these kids employability skills. We did a push for foster care youth to make sure that we work with these kids to get jobs. We fund many of the foster care, I'm sure Educate Tomorrow, the Guardian Ad Litem program, many of the programs to support these students. And we also run, and we're pivoting, but we're running and we're now moving it to Citrus, the Heart Gallery, to help these kids also get adopted, to help people find for their forever home. So we have a variety of things with foster care. I'm not sure if there's a specific program you want me to dive into, but it really is how do we know how many kids are in the foster care system, and it's how do we help transition these kids when they age out into normal life environments or as normal as possible.
No, that's really helpful to know. One of the assignments that the students were working on was to research current policy issues around that issue and to develop recommendations to decision makers on perhaps maybe to make improvements within that area. Along those lines, I'm going to kind of jump ahead to one of the other questions is, what advice do you have for students who are hoping to affect change in their communities and hoping to make an impact through public service?
Well, I think as you start getting into your jobs, your careers, your leaderships in these areas, it seems kind of overwhelming, and sometimes it seems daunting that it's hard that one person can make a difference. But I've witnessed it over and over again. One person can make a difference. One person with passion, with heart, with conviction can absolutely make a difference. So what I encourage you is, it does get frustrating sometimes dealing with, and if you're looking into foster care and policies, you're going to get bogged down in the bureaucracies and the legalities and everything else. But people who really create change are people who just have the heart, passion, almost will it to happen, that they will not take no for an answer, and they'll keep on fighting. So I do know how frustrating it is. I'm not sure of everybody's background or where you're at in your careers or what your journey is or was going to be, but you can make a difference, and you've seen it. I mean, looking firsthand at what Dave Lawrence did, almost single-handedly, creating the trust, having VPK for all the kids throughout Florida. That's one person who made a difference. And that's Dave, and Dave kind of on a larger scale. But I think all of us come across people day to day who've made a difference. And, you just got to make a difference in one life and then the other, and then it just compounds. So what my recommendation is, keep the heart, keep the passion, do not get discouraged. There will be days you beat your head against a wall, beat your head, get your breath, and continue the fight.
Yeah, and a lot of times we look to our leaders, leaders like Dave and yourself, to kind of help guide our ways. Within what do you consider what is your leadership style or philosophy?
Your leadership styles change over the years too. I think when I was very young, I think I was the youngest high school principal in Miami-Dade County Public Schools history. So when I was very young and I got there, what you lack in wisdom, you have in energy. And then it kind of flips as you start getting older. So it really has been to bring people, there's a quote, and I can't remember it verbatim, but it's to bring people along for a ride, to get them to where you want them to go and let them think they've done it themselves. You really don't need to tell people. As soon as you flex your muscle and say, I'm the boss, you just lost a fight. It really is to get people who want to work for you, who feel empowered, who feel that they're being heard and have the ability to lead. I'm a big believer in surrounding myself with people who are much smarter than me. Never had a problem doing that. I hire people, surround myself with talent. There's a couple of things I look for when I hire is you can't teach passion, and you can't teach hunger, and you know people who have the fight in them, and you can't teach that. Everything else you can teach. So if I can get someone who's loyal, who's passionate, who's driven, you can. I mean, that's, going back to what I was highlighting with Natalia, I don't take a long time to hire people either. Some people take months. I just need to have coffee and I can figure it out. So Natalia was someone who I went after because of her hunger and passion and her willingness to make a difference. And that's just like the rest of my team. And then you get out of people's way. You let them run, you get out of people's way. And my job is just to tap people and make sure we're going the same direction. It's kind of like the sporting crew. You can have people rowing, but people have to start rowing at the same time and get to the Olympic speed. Instead of tipping over, just continue to work, continue to refine. And that doesn't happen overnight. It takes quite a bit of time. And again, with wisdom, and if you are allowing people and you want people to step out and lead and be amazing leaders, you also got to protect them and let them know they will fail. You will. And then when they fail, that you're also there to support them and get them back up and let them continue leading. So it has been a supportive style. I can't say I've always been like that. When I was younger, I was much more a hammer. But now you realize how to take people along for the ride with you.
Oh, that's great advice. So one of the assignments that our students just had a couple of weeks ago was they did resume writing, they did cover letters, and they're doing a portfolio. And some of the advice that you gave is great in terms of just showing your passion and kind of putting your best foot forward. What are some of the other ways that you can suggest that students can help, for students that are seeking careers in public policy and service to help themselves stand out?
I can just speak, I can speak about myself because I know that that's the easiest one to speak for. But when I was trying to break in to be a principal, I could not get a job. It was back in I don't even remember, the 90s. Yeah, the 90s. And the public sector is inverse to the private. When the private sector is doing great, it's people are leaving government and the public sector. When the economies go south, you have a rush coming in. So there's an inverse relationship with the economy and staffing and everything else. But for some reason, I couldn't get a job. So what I did is I just started showing up and volunteering. And that's how I got my first job. I volunteered for the summer, one summer for 6 weeks. I worked for free. Just got to know people. People hire who they know. The next summer, I did the same thing. I went. They knew me, and an extra position opened up. They slid me right in. But going back, people do hire who they know. If you go there, you don't want to just, resumes are great, but you want people to know who you are, to know about you, to know your work ethic, your convictions. So it's just get involved. I mean, during the day, and many of you have full-time jobs, you have families. I know it's easier said than done. But showing up, volunteering, going to networking sessions, doing all the right things just to put your best foot forward and separate you from everybody else. You can outwork people. You can be the best person in the world, but if you're at home and nobody knows about you, it's kind of hard. So you got to just put yourself out there, get out there and just start networking and meeting people, whatever sector you want to be in. And what I found too, and I think many of us with the leaders in this community, it is, and Dave may have spoke about this, Miami's a huge city, but it's a very small city. There's, the leaders are the same leaders. You're at different events with the same group of people. And it's not hard to break into that group. And it's not hard to reach them, and it's not hard to ask them. Every one of them that I've asked for advice, for counsel, for wisdom, everyone's always opened a door. I've never had anyone tell me no. So I think people will help you. You just have to ask, and you have to be willing to expose yourself and not be willing to come forward. So my advice would really just to get out there, let people know about you, let people know the work that you do. And it's building relationships. It's not just coming to say, I want something. It's just building long-term relationships, because even when you leave jobs, I always make that bridge stronger. You never know when you're going to cross that bridge again. So build strong relationships throughout the community. And when you're here long enough, you have your 1 degree of separation. You can get to anybody with a phone call.
So true. I agree with all of that. and it really, when you think about it, one of the things that you said really kind of resonates is that, you know, as you're reaching out, remember to give before you expect to receive, you know, make a deposit before trying to make a withdrawal, you know, add some value to the relationship. And one thing that we can easily do in this day and age via social media is follow and support, you know, the organizations that you're interested in. Follow their social media, like their posts, you know, comment on them. You know, at least in this virtual age, is one way to kind of build that name recognition and to be seen as, you know, supportive and somebody who's aware of what that organization is doing.
It is. And one last thing, just the personal touches, you know, for pretty much everyone, especially when I was going up through the ranks, anyone who I met, anyone gave me advice, thank you notes were handwritten and sent out regularly. Even now, we generate any promotions, congratulations, letters come out. So you got to build those things, what people see on social media, but also behind the scenes to build on those one-on-one connections.
Absolutely. You know, take that little time. And again, it may not be all the time, but showing up and having that connection can go a long way. I want to start moving into our questions from our students. And I see one from in the chat, which I thought was really interesting. Chloe Little says, over 20 years of Such a Power initiative. And she's curious to know if any full circle success stories, have any of the children from the early stages of the Children's Trust go on to join the board or pursue public administration that you know of?
That's a great question. And that's one thing Natalia is asking for. So we're going on, because it's our 20th anniversary, we're doing a massive marketing push. And we just asked our staff to start identifying stories of people I've gone through. I don't know anyone in public office, but we actually had a young lady who was working as our social media at the Trust, and she came through Trust programs throughout elementary, middle, and high school, and she started working for us, and she states all the time that she's come full circle. So it's difficult because we have so many, we have 2,000 sites, and you know, we're just, the last 6 years, one of my biggest, you know, it was automating everything. And we were a young organization. We were 13 years old when I took over, trying to move from a paper and pencil, a kind of, I don't want to say a startup, but it was still young, and we're trying to grow into, you know, getting through our teenage awkward years. So we started using technology and automating all our system, but it's very hard to track the touch points. We have kids that go to early childhood, may go through our health clinics, may go through different after school program. So now it's just really searching those stories. I have been, you know, in my other role, I've had tons from the elementary, middle, and high school, the kids that go on, and, you know, that's tens of thousands. You see them all over the place. But for the Trust, we don't have necessarily a tracking mechanism. So we're getting out there and trying to have stories of people letting us know. And we want to embed those stories at starting May when we have our kickoff for our 20-year, all next year is telling the Trust success story. So we're actually actively looking for the Trust success stories.
I will share that my daughter was signed up for the book club and did the after school programs at Comstock Elementary in Allapattah, and we'll be starting at FIU this summer. So I'll count her as one of those success stories.
That's great. It looks like we have a couple of other questions. Safari, did you want to just go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. So mainly my question, how, like when looking at the problems that you see in like in the community, what's your approach on creating solutions to that problem, like to those problems that you see? Like, so when, you know, working on the various memos that we have, where we should offer like recommendations for that, and creating like solutions that aren't tired or like, you know, that you've seen before, that's like kind of a struggle. So I was just wondering if you could take me on your own brainstorming process.
Yeah, that's kind of a difficult question for me. One is there's so many problems. You know, we have an exceptionally wealthy city, exceptionally wealthy. But from you, I mean, you go to Brickell, you go to downtown, you see all those $1 million condos. You go 2 blocks away and you have extreme poverty. So you have the huge have and have nots. I was down in Florida City today. You know, you have a huge footprint. So there's so much need. I mean, you have the housing that you can just go on and on of the different needs. I think the opportunity, and I've said this repeatedly, I think the opportunity for Miami to shine is not necessarily, and you know, people will push back, but not necessarily more money. It's systems alignment. We have so many people doing so many great things and so many organizations that are, whether it's foster care, homelessness, children, elderly, you have so many programs, but the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. We don't know if we're saturating areas with funding. We don't know if we're duplicating efforts. We don't know if there's deserts in some areas because there's no real system that deal with everything, with government, with school system, with the nonprofits, universities, everything. Everyone kind of works in silos. If there's, and again, it's difficult to work with, bring everybody to the table. But as we continue looking, my recommendation for this group is as you're looking at really fixing solutions, I don't think you're going to reinvent the wheel for any one thing. I don't think you're going to fix the foster care system. There's improvements that can be made, but to really kind of jolt and rethink of how we work would be, could there be a systems? And what's very difficult is you get into data agreements, you get into the attorneys, and it just paralyzes everything for a year. So, you know, I understand the data and tracking, but if there is some coordinated systems approach, that I think is where the opportunities for this community to move to the next level is. It's not additional funding. I think there's plenty of funding. You know, let me take that back. You can't fund enough. The gaps are so big. You can spend, the trust can have $400 million and it's still not going to be enough. So how do we do it early? How do we change the trajectory of children and families and health and everything else at a very early stage? And then how do we support them through an integrated approach with the entire community, with the healthcare system and the whole social determinants and everything else? That is really the moonshot.
Awesome. We have another question from Margaret. Margaret, do you want to ask your question?
Sure, thank you. Mr. Hash, I was wondering, how did you enhance or further develop the students' engagement at Southwest Miami High School to raise their academic achievement?
Yeah, I don't think it's really the student engagement. It's really the adults. It's the adults that we had to change. It wasn't the kids. The kids come through the door. It's the same kids that come to all schools. It's really raising expectations. So my biggest challenge was raising the expectation of the staff to make sure that the status quo was not going to be accepted. Because I remember my first faculty meeting, the thought was that we're going to drop to a D again. And I said, we're going to be a B. And half of the people laughed at me and said that will never happen. We're not like the other schools. And then again, being naive and being dumb and being young, I gave everybody transfer papers and told them, if you don't like being here, go to another school or I'm going to fire you, which wasn't the smartest move because, you know, then you deal with union issues and everything gets pushed back. But I was young and I was passionate. But it really was, you have teachers who just kind of, they've been there for years. And it's not that many of them were bad. It was just to light that fire under them and say, we can do it. And then it was really coordinating, going back to systems approach, that building systems and data that I sat with the athletic director to sit with every athlete. So every coach knew their kid. And if they weren't performing or they're late or misbehaving, they were not wearing a school uniform. The band, the cheerleader, and have all the 100 clubs supporting it. And again, everybody rowing in the same direction, having the parents putting strict discipline policies and just spending years kind of developing a culture and a climate. And it wasn't to get to an A, it was get to an A, sustain the A, to make sure that excellence is built into the school and that'll outlive me. So it took a lot of hard work, but it was really working with systems. Kids are great. You know, we had 3,500 kids and everybody was talking about the kids. The kids are phenomenal. They always are. And the kids will rise to expectation. And just like anybody else, if a kid goes into a classroom, they will take tough love and discipline if they know the teacher cares for them. And if they know the teacher has a heart, they'll take anything. They'll take the discipline. They'll also say thank you for it if they know the teacher cares. But on the contrary too, if they know the teacher doesn't care at all, they know that with the first 5 minutes during that classroom. So the work was really with the adults and changing the parents and the teachers with the expectation of where we will move to. And it was not going to stay the same. And it was just drilling that into them.
Thank you.
I think Melanie's question in the chat is kind of a follow-up to that. Melanie, did you want to ask?
Yes, yeah, it's kind of following up, like how would you continue to motivate teachers and just continue like to push them to do better? Because I know like now as a former high school student, there was many times where you can tell teachers that would teach, or you can tell that they weren't really into it. So how would you like implement that motivation?
Yeah, it really was. There's a couple things with that. One is that, what gets measured gets done. So it really is getting the data. And that's before we didn't really have systems back then. So it was really kind of developing our own system. And even with AP teachers and your higher end teachers, so it was kind of correlating AP scores to grades. If the person's not passing their AP score, they shouldn't be getting A in the class, and vice versa. So it was really just coordinating everything. But then it was also, the school system, and I'm sure FIU does this as well, and all agencies. We do performance reviews on all our staff, on teachers, on staff, and we spend millions and hundreds of millions of dollars on performance reviews. But going back, and I think one takeaway for this group is, as you start leading, you have people following you. When you do the performance review, they talk about the inter-reader reliability and all these terms about evaluating. But the real goal is that the person on the other side is not receiving your feedback, or think you're coming with a hammer, or is not open to change. Those hundreds of $millions is money out the door. So part of being a leader is having a relationship to say, I'm not out to get you. What we're trying to do is get the continuous improvement and trying to get better. All of us continue to get better. I'm giving you feedback. I truly care about you. I care about you. I care about your family. I'm not out. I just want what's best for the kids. And when you start developing that rapport, and that, depending on the size of school, when you have hundreds of teachers, it's kind of hard. But you got to start with your leadership and your department chairs and everything. But when you get to the place that they know it's not a got you, and that you create a culture and climate which takes years of, I'm going to be honest with you, but I'm coming from a good place, from a heart, and I'm going to tell you how it's going, and I'm going to support you, and we're going to get through this together, it starts changing. If you come as somebody who's out to get them, the walls will come up, there will be no change, and you're going to be spinning and frustrating yourself as well as the employee, and make it a toxic work environment. So my recommendation to you is create a culture that people are willing to accept the feedback you're giving. That's
great advice. I'm going to jump back to the question from Chloe.
Natalia doesn't listen to me, though. Just want to point that out. Okay, there you go.
Jim's created a great culture at the Trust, and I've a lot of places, so I can say that.
Chloe, did you want to ask your question about being a board member?
Sure. Hi, Mr. Hodge. I appreciate your presence today, and my question is basically about wanting to be a board member one day. But right now, it seems, a little far-fetched with just finishing up my undergrad. But I'm curious to know from, your experience leading at the Children's Trust, what exactly does that commitment require? Like, I'm thinking leaders, teachers, doctors, lawyers, dedicating a certain amount of hours within a month for specific initiatives that you guys have all across South Florida, possibly the state. And then I'm wondering if there's like a donation requirement in order to, like, how does one become one of the 33 board members? And as someone who's interested in that nonprofit sector, what is the most crucial part or committee with a new non-for-profit? Would that be fundraising, marketing, platform, mission creating? That's 3 questions, but I appreciate any response you have.
Well, I'll try to piecemeal it. So let me see if I get it right. So are you talking about the board? Are you talking about specifically the trust or any board?
Specifically the trust.
Okay. So I told you that we have 13 other sister organizations. So they all have 10-member boards. But Dave, in his infinite wisdom, created a 33-member board, I think, just to give me a hard time. So we have a large board. I wouldn't mind going to the 10-member board, but we have a 33-member board. But our 33 members is dictated in statute. So we have it's pretty much all your, when Dave was envisioning the trust, he wanted to put everybody under one umbrella that deals with children and families. So everybody on our board, it's a good portion is by position: the superintendent, the mayor, the juvenile justice, the head of juvenile justice, judge, the state attorney, the college president. So there's a group of them that are by position. So whatever the super was, Carvalho, and now it's Dotra. So it's by position. When the mayor's changed, the seats change too. The trust only has, and then there's 7, so as a citizen, there's 7 gubernatorial seats that that have to go through the board of Miami-Dade Board of County Commissioners. First, they'll advertise for each seat. They'll select 3, send it up to the governor, and the governor selects 1, and those serve a 4-year term and eligible for 2 more additional renewals. So those come up every 4 years. It comes out into the public. What we put on in the Herald, on the news stations, and you should hear it. The only ones that the trust has direct control over, we have 4 at-large. And the 4 at-large, the board will select the at-large individual. So the same process, just keep an eye on the trust on the website. We'll put it on the paper when those seats become available. They interview, and the board's smart because sometimes they're looking for a specific individual and specific skill set. The last at-large, we really didn't have a medical professional on there. And the trust was founded with Judy Schechter, who ran the UM Pediatrics, and that's how we started. So we needed a doctor, so they specifically went after a medical professional. Sometimes we also had, before that, it was Matt Arsenault, who's a CFO of Baptist Hospital, and we needed the financial acumen because, to run the 200 million, not only do you need the provider and the social services side, you also need the back end side with the financial. So we try to keep a balance. So the two areas would be for the trust would be at the at-large or the gubernatorial seats. And you can find that on our website. The commitments for the trust, the commitment's not that heavy. I mean, we do not fundraise because our money's from property taxes. So we have the money. We don't have to ask for money. It's more of a governance structure. Any other board, it's really, they're looking for people to help fundraise. All the other nonprofit board, and even our small, many years ago, we started a small CBO capacity building because nonprofits are businesses. So many people go into nonprofits from a very pure heart to make a difference and to solve some problems. But many of those people don't have the business acumen. And if you can't run a quality business, you can't run a quality nonprofit. So working on that business acumen is greatly needed, the fundraising. So even with our small CBO, we talk about board management, board recruitment, and how to run a board, because you need a great board for a nonprofit, and even childcare centers, anything else. You cannot do it just with a pure heart. You need the business acumen and have a sound business backing to run the nonprofit. And again, for those of you who are looking to go in nonprofits, my only other thing is we have thousands of nonprofits. Before you reinvent the wheel and take on administrative costs and figure out that, there's people who do it. We can partner, you can look, you can subcontract. You don't have to do it all or start a brand new nonprofit, because I'm pretty sure there's a nonprofit that does it all here in Miami. So, it's better to partner and work together. I was just talking this morning, I was with someone all day who was the CEO of General Mills, and he's also on big pharma boards. And we were just talking about board management. I spent all day talking to him about board management. And I'm going to see him right after this for dinner. And we're going to talk about that. But the boards are an interesting place, and it's an interesting dynamic, but I think it's a great opportunity for people here, for people on this call. If you're working full time and you want to get involved and you don't, all nonprofits are looking, not all, but there's a great many nonprofits looking for board members. It's a very good way to get involved, learn I think the board members who are on the trust do an amazing job. I also think they learn a lot about this community serving on the trust, because there's a lot that gets discussed about all aspects of our community.
Great question.
Chloe, I don't know if I answered your question. Sorry if I didn't answer your question.
No, that was very informative. Thank you so much. And I think it's definitely interest for many of these students who have expressed that they want to either work or even, like you said, start a nonprofit, but kind of knowing what's already out there is one option. Angela, you have your hand up?
Yes, hi, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hodge, for being here tonight. And I appreciate what you're doing for the students and the children in Miami, I actually reside in Tampa, and we have, I think, the 7th largest school district in the country. So I, I volunteer with students there and for a couple of different programs. And I can definitely relate to what you're saying about trying to change the culture. Kind of gets really guarded when there's an outside agency or, you know, another opinion coming in. And I'm not a professional long-term person in this field, but I do appreciate your insight on it, starting with the adults, because the kids are ready for whatever, you know, whatever we present to them. So thank you so much for that perspective. When Natalie was reading your bio, she mentioned that you were able to grow the special needs culture, inclusive, make it more inclusive for special needs. And one of the projects we're working on is for foster kids and aging out. And I'm really trying to focus on the special needs foster kids aging out and what skills that they need that may not be presented or thought of in the foster care system. How did you, can you give us some examples of what you did to encourage the school board or the district to be more inclusive of special needs students?
Yeah, well, special needs, and then your question about the foster care kids who are disabled, that are aging out?
Developmentally disabled.
Yeah.
You know, I have a nephew who's on the autism spectrum. He's high functional, but he's gonna, you know, I couldn't imagine him being in the foster care system without his parents.
That's a big problem. That is one area that needs some policy around it, because these kids who are aging out, it's not only when they age out, and even though those who are well-to-do, you know, what happens when their parents pass, and where do these kids live? Miami-Dade has just started. Is it Casa Familia? I think it's Casa Valentina, one of the Casas. There's so many Casa Familia, right? So they're building, I don't know how many units, kind of near Miami-Dade South, for disabled, elderly disabled, or individuals who are disabled over the age of 18 who need a place to reside. I think Tallahassee has started one. I think there's 3 places in the state that are doing this, but it is a huge need. And I know every parent, you know, it's hard to be a parent. It's hard to be a parent if you don't have means. And if you're a parent without means with a kid with a disability, it's you know, it's tough. So when these kids age out, there needs to be some housing. But going back to at the school, again, I think it's hard. Culture and climate cannot be measured. I don't know a way to measure it, but it's hard to change. I think besides moving Southwest to an A, which I was very proud of, what I was most proud of the school was when the year I left, the king and queen of the school were 2 intellectually disabled kids for prom. So the student body elected these 2 intellectually disabled children. Well, they're young adults, king and queen. And I knew at that time, you know, we made a dent. You know, we made it. We had the largest special ed population in Miami-Dade. We had over 500, well, if you included gifted, over 1,000, but 500 with intellectually disabled, deaf, hard of hearing, and others. And we also had the largest ESOL population. But changing a culture where the kids are not in the classroom, that, you know, a lot of programs that we put the kids on the football field to help with the football team. We had them deliver the mail to the teachers to go in and out of the classrooms. We had the largest Best Buddies. That's when Best Buddies started. We had the largest Best Buddies. And just finding every opportunity you can to include them into, you know, all the field trips, all the sporting events, everything that we could, we just started including them. And like going back to the kids will rise to the occasion. Kids are great. Kids are kind. And it was amazing how we paired these kids up and some of the relationships that formed from that long-term relationship. So it's just creating culture and climate. I don't think there's any right way to do it. I don't think there's a playbook. I think it's trying to find every opportunity you can to put inclusive practices in.
Thank you.
We have about 10 minutes left, so wanted to see if there are any other questions from any of the students or attendees.
I had a follow-up question. Just one area I was thinking that maybe we could touch on a little bit is what is it, you know, since a lot of these students are looking at going into public administration, I think until I worked in government, I didn't understand how sometimes politics can balance with policy and can balance with administration, and how keeping the administration of public dollars separate is important. So I was wondering, Jim, just if you had any thoughts just generally about that balance, that special balance that is working in a governmental entity that maybe the private sector does not deal with as much.
Yeah, dealing with taxpayer money is not an easy thing. You know, from the school system point of view, from the trust, from the county, you have to be fiscally responsible. You're dealing with taxpayer money. So you got to make sure that everything's out, that, you know, part of, I think Natalia mentioned it in my bio. One of the things that I did when I first started the trust was that we were at 10% management expenses. And I said, you know, we got to figure out the best way. Our money is to support children and families, not to hire people, not to hire, because you can hire hundreds of people, but how do we do this and put the most money? So we dropped it from 10% every year to 6%. And that 4% sounds like a little, but it's a lot when you cut management expenses. If you have a department and you lose one, it's hard. Then you start losing 3, 4, and 5. And then I was the devil for a while, but that's okay. But, you know, part of the real goal is how do you balance what Natalia was talking about, the taxpayer needs and the government oversight. You know, you need to have the oversight, you need to have the return on investment. But how do you do this and provide the best service you can to children and families? So it's a balancing act. There is no right or wrong. There's no, you know, there's no percent that says this is the one you should be at. But it's how do you use government funds, taxpayer funds, and then how do you navigate that in a political environment? I mean, you see the politics on a national level, the local level gets crazy sometimes. So you also have to be able to navigate the politics of the community you serve. And you have to be very cautious of that. Miami, you know, the hard thing with the trust or FIU or anything is that Miami, it's a big city, it's diverse, you have different cultures in different parts. But you also got, what is it, 36 municipalities? I think we have 36, 34. So you have 34 mayors, 34 sets of commissioners.
38, I don't know.
You have 9 school board members. You got 13 commissioners. You got everybody who thinks that they know how to do things and will tell you where the need is and how you have to fill it. So it's really navigating that and going, you know, as we close, as you start making decisions, you know, that sometimes there's not easy decisions. You'll get tugged and you'll get pulled and you'll have sleepless nights. My only recommendation to you is try to keep your integrity in check, keep your moral compass straight, make the best decisions you can, and be comfortable with your decisions. And again, you will be pulled to do things that you may not want to do. I pretty much my entire career has been able to put my head on a pillow at night and sleep comfortably. And as you get that tug and pull, you have your moral compass, you have that little voice inside your head, stick to it. Do not deviate from that. Do what's right for whatever if for us as children and families, whatever program you're at, do it. You will have board members, you'll have community leaders, and you'll have people who will tell you. Many people have advice all around, but you know, you're in whatever role you're in that role to make the best decisions. If you're a decision maker, do the best that you can. Take input, listen to everybody, but make your own decision.
Fantastic advice. Thank you so much for that. I'm not sure if we have time for one more question, but just kind of related, since it's related to public funding. You had mentioned, of course, the dedicated funding source. That isn't tied to property taxes, but perhaps you could provide a little more insight into how the funding structure works.
It is. So the funding for the trust is from property taxes, from ad valorem. So I've seen the question here, and it's a great question. It does correlate. So as you know, the last several years with the market going a little crazy, the property values, our revenue stream has increased as well. So I think from 2016, between the revenue increasing and us dropping management expenses, we've been able to add almost about $50 million per year to support additional programs for children and families in Miami. The difficulty of that, because again, you have to, we fund by doing RFPs and soliciting. So we do an RFP, we put it out there. We have a solicitation process that comes to our board. So everything we do through competitive solicitation, and now we're in a 5-year cycle. So if we put on RFP, it's for 5 years. So if we're guaranteeing, or there's an out, but we're guaranteeing that you're on a 5-year commitment. So my big fear, that concerns me quite a bit, is the bubble bursting in Miami, which is a very real possibility. Maybe not the market bursting, but even the market start going down a little bit. So if the market starts going down, we have a fund balance, and it usually hovers around 2 months, 20%, 30%. Right now it's about 20 or 30 million reserve. So you need to keep that for many different reasons. One's for cash flow, but the other thing is when a hurricane hits, or in 2008 when the economy went south, or when COVID, when the community needs us the most, we need to be there for them. We don't want to have no money to be able to react to the community needs. So it's kind of finding that balancing act of how do you put the most money in the streets, keep a reserve, balance that against future risk of property values going down. And also we have the issue of everything's getting more expensive. So even running our current programs is costing more. For personnel, everyone's having the same issue, trying to find and retain. So there's a lot of factors, but it's a great question. Yes, the apartment market directly relates. We've had a great run. My really concern is in 2 or 3 years from now. I think there's 2 or 3 years are going to be a nightmare for many different reasons. If it starts going down, it's going down at the same time all this major federal money infusion is going to be sunsetting from the federal and state level, all that money coming out. So hopefully everything goes well and the market sustains and we're able to adjust. But I hope we do not have a 2008 where the housing market starts going down significantly.
Absolutely. Thank you again so much for this evening. This has been fantastic. Thank you for the students for your really insightful questions. We really appreciated this time that you spent with us and the insight that you provided. Ms. Holly, do you have any final thoughts as well?
No, just thank the students for being so engaged. I appreciate that folks always have good questions. It means they're paying attention, and it makes it worthwhile to bring speakers like Jim here to speak with you. Thank you so much, Jim, for your time. I know it's an evening. You have a family like everybody else, so thank you for being here.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. And looking around and seeing, again, I'm so optimistic and seeing the individual engaged, the amazing questions being asked. Very optimistic and very excited about our future. And just for everybody on this call, keep the passion. We got a great community. Whatever you want to do in the future, it's yours. Don't let anybody box you in, and keep on doing great things.
Awesome. Students, if you will, join me with the reactions and giving him a round of applause, and just thank you again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
So for the class, I have a couple of announcements. Hopefully you saw the announcement that we sent out